It's an honor to be with you this morning, and I can't thank enough the Rockford, Rockford Area Economic Development Council and the Transform Rockford, Mike Zablonsky and Mike Nicholas for helping us coordinate this event for today. And especially it's an honor to have Dr. Easter travel up from Champaign and Director Schultz travel up from Effingham. I believe you have other events in the Rockford area, but we're certainly honored that you shared some thoughts with us today. It's also an honor to be with the leadership of this area. As Bob said, home has been a family farm over off of Route 47, just about 12 miles south of the Huntley interchange. So Rockford is, well, I guess I've been in Rockford's backyard most of my life, and we've had family members living up in this Rockford area. I should also mention that in the mid-1990s, for about 10 years, I traveled to St. Paul, Minnesota once a month because I served on a bank board up there. I'd come to the Rockford airport because it was more convenient for me than getting to O'Hare when Northwest was running their commuter flights up to the Twin Cities. So I understand very much the value and the strategic location of Rockford. As Dr. Easter mentioned, is this on and can you hear me? As Dr. Easter mentioned, I just returned here this spring after spending much of the last decade in Washington heading up the financial regulator of the Farm Credit System. That's about $250 billion in assets. I was a nominee of former President Bush that arrived out there in 2006 at a time when the economy was doing well. And I thought, well, this can't be that difficult of a job, being a financial regulator. You know, a year or two later, I found myself sitting in the room with the other leaders of the financial regulators, including Ben Bernanke of the Federal Reserve, Sheila Bair, chair of the FDIC. We're probably the least known regulator of the Farm Credit Administration, but I was at the table. I like challenges. This is the challenge for Illinois. As Director Schultz said, Food and Agricultural Roadmap. Think of farm in this instance as the acronym only. This is not the farm that we traditionally think of as we drive along the beautiful highways and byways of Illinois, where we see so much of this. Obviously, with technology today and the rich soils and the infrastructure that we have, Illinois has become one of the predominant producers of corn and soybeans, pork, a lot of agricultural products that feeds the world. But this is also about this. There's a lot of local production that's going on in the United States, and it's growing significantly. And I know the Rockford area is giving a lot of thought and really engaging in that process. But this is also about this segment of our state. We are rich in our capabilities, and the fact that Dr. Easter chairs this, the former president of the University of Illinois, and with his agricultural background, signifies that we are leaders in research, technology, education in so many areas. And when you think, we just toured recently the research park at the University of Illinois, and adjacent to the park, you've got one of the world's largest supercomputers, Blue Waters. Right here, that's an asset of our state. But we're also about the towns and cities across Illinois. I think everybody recognizes this picture on the globe. Chicago. But this isn't just Chicago. This is Rockford. This is Bloomington Normal, Champaign, Peoria, Quincy, Carbondale, Effingham. This is about the story of where we've been, but what we need to do going forward. That is the roadmap we call Farm Illinois. But here's what I'm briefly going to cover in the next 15 or 20 minutes. The opportunity for Illinois, the background and overview, the recommendations and actions that came out of this year-long effort, and the next steps. Again, Dr. Easter and Director Schultz covered kind of the significant numbers. We're all familiar with where we stand. Chicago, for a long time, has been a global hub and magnet, innovation. Again, John Deere was mentioned. You know, you think of Cyrus McCormick, the Board of Trade, the Mercantile Exchange, the Chicago Union Stockyards. It's been a hub and a leader. But the world is changing so quickly, And Jim, I'm going to just build a little bit on your statistics because I was at a conference recently at the invitation of the Secretary of Agriculture back in Washington. I've been home in Illinois now about 6 months outside the Washington Beltway, and I'm happy to report my doctor says that a couple more weeks and I should be back to normal. But the Secretary invited me back for a conference about investment in agriculture. He put those statistics in this terms. He says in the next 35 years, to feed that now, the number, according to the UN at the end of July, is 9.7 billion residents of this planet by 2050. We will have to have as much innovation in the next 35 years as has occurred in the past 10,000 years. It's stunning to think of the challenges ahead of us. The mission of Farm Illinois was to develop this comprehensive strategic plan to enable Illinois and the Chicago region to become the leading global hub for food and agricultural system innovation and ensure that leadership in sustainably meeting the local and global food security issues for the future. What makes this Farm Illinois project unique? In my last 10 years almost in Washington, I traveled to every part of the country to look at food and agriculture because the farm credit system is the largest provider of credit and financing. Again, $250 billion to the agriculture and food industry. I saw a lot of interesting things going on around the country, but I have not seen an effort like Farm Illinois, and that's why when I was asked to come on board with this, when I returned here this spring, I said, yes, I would like to take on this challenge because they had already spent the previous 6 to 9 months, the group of 150 leaders in the food and agriculture industries, infrastructure. You will see in a moment a slide that shows some of the players in this. But I said, this is a coordinated effort like we have never seen before. It has moved just beyond the agricultural segment in our state. The leaders in agriculture talking just about agriculture, production agriculture. It's moved beyond the inner city discussions going on about food security for their residents, accessibility, growing more local. It's moved to the point of you've brought together for the first time all of these players in this segment at the table, and some you would be surprised because they've been so opposite ends of the spectrum, coming to the agreement and realization that we have much more to gain together than we do pursuing our own special interests. The report comes up with clear actionable items to position the state as a regional, national, and global hub. And in a moment, you'll see the results of some of those recommendations. The Chicago Community Trust, as Dr. Easter mentioned, this discussion evolved out of the culmination of the Vision for Illinois Agriculture. And the Chicago Community Trust, the Searle funds, at the Chicago Community Trust offered to fund the bulk of this project for the last year. With that, then, and building on that support, these other additional entities became financial supporters of this. So you look, you've got the ADMs, you've got one of the largest family-owned farming operations in the country, the third largest producer of pork in the country. You have the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. You have Fresh Taste out of Chicago that is really dealing with the ability to raise locally, feed the residents. It's focused on local food innovation. But then you also look, you've got, and this is a puzzling one. So why United Airlines? Some people ask. United has a goal of fueling their fleet of aircraft with next generation biofuels in the next 20 years. So they became a financial supporter and a member of the Farm Illinois process. The Leadership Council, chaired by Dr. Easter, these were the other co-chairs of the process and committee co-chairs. And you can see you've got President of the Illinois Farm Bureau, President of Chicago Council on Global Affairs, Gary Ash of the Farm Credit System, Finance, Transportation, Global Philanthropy Partnership. You can see the individuals at the table. This group had never been assembled before to bring agriculture this close with business and philanthropic and civic leadership. There were 5 committees that looked at production and supply chain, the transportation and logistics, sustainability and community workforce development, international markets, and innovation and education. It yielded a comprehensive report with actionable strategic plan. Again, 150 people, 20 meetings that occurred from mid last year till May of this year, and 23 recommendations to ensure that we have that leadership going forward here in Illinois. The plan itself, a roadmap for coordination to unleash our potential. You know, some say that, well, we've been leaders. But as you heard Dr. Schultz say, the world is changing quickly. If we do not pursue new leadership routes, we will fall behind. There will be other places on the globe, whether it's Beijing or Sao Paulo or somewhere around the world, that will take on the leadership role of innovation in feeding this world. I'm going to go through the 6 areas currently and just highlight a couple of the goals and the strategies. In the area of leadership and innovation, our goal is to develop an integrated statewide long-term public-private strategy for achieving the goals. The first one of them will be the establishment of the Illinois Council for Food and Agriculture. The Farm Illinois Leadership Group is going to be convening on October 9th in Chicago. And at that meeting, we assume that the group will move toward the next phase, the establishment of this council. This council will be a central body in the state who will be an advocate for change and opportunity in the food and agricultural space. And we hope, what we've already found, I should say, is that while we've been around the state, we have been receiving calls and interest from interest in the food and agricultural sectors, calling us and saying, can you help us with this project? So we see the value in that. I also want to reiterate that in this, I want you to think of how does this apply to Rockford? Because personally, and living so close to Rockford, and seeing the infrastructure that's here, from the airport to the interstate system, to the rail system, to the intermodal hub in Rochelle, you're in the center of the triangle of Chicago, Madison, University of Wisconsin, Quad Cities. This is probably one of the most strategic locations in all of the state for opportunity to evolve out of innovation in the food and agricultural space. The second item there has gotten a lot of interest from us recently at the release of this report. 2018, Illinois' bicentennial year. One of the goals of Farm Illinois is to host a world-class. Dr. Easter coined this, let's make it the Davos of food and agriculture, referring to the World Economic Forum held every January in Davos, Switzerland. Hold a symposium and a forum here in Illinois that brings global leadership, global interest in all of these areas to Illinois and make it the premier global event. That's gotten a lot of international interest because we've had some companies around the globe calling us upon our press release in May, inquiring about that. You can also see the other items here under strategies. Business development and entrepreneurship. You know, Director Schultz referenced the importance of business development in the state. You know, and I'll have to mention, when I was in Washington, D.C., in the first few years I was out there, when I was introduced to some folks, new people I met, and there's a lot of people in agriculture I find out in Washington who are from Iowa. When I'd get introduced to them and I'd say, my name is Lee Strom, I'm from Illinois, one of their first responses would be they want to give me condolences. You know, and they say, well, you're from Illinois. Illinois's got a lot of trouble in its fiscal house in Illinois. And I said, well, wait a second. We have a long-running issue that needs to be resolved, and I think we will come up with strategies, long-term strategies to affect that. But I also said, give us time, because we will emerge as a global leader in this, and that's why it's an honor for me to be involved in this. So improving our business development, because sometimes at your darkest hours is when you need to take the boldest steps. And I applaud the governor for taking bold steps at this point, because at Ag Day at the Illinois State Fair, if I recall, the governor spent the entire day We understand his interest and emphasis in the food and agricultural sector. But in your darkest hours, just think of the darkest hours in our nation's history. You simply have to refer back to Illinois' favorite son, Abraham Lincoln. It was the darkest hours of the Civil War in 1862 that he took and the Congress took some of the boldest steps. They formed the Department of Agriculture. They passed the Morrill Act, President signed, establishing land-grant universities in the U.S. They passed the Homestead Act, opening the West. And they also passed the act to connect the Union Pacific railroads. I guess you'd say that was a real significant advancement for that time. But in the darkest hours, they took the boldest steps to have the longest term impact. We still benefit from that today. If this is Illinois' darkest hours, now is the time to focus on those things that move us forward, and that's why food and agricultural system innovation can lead our state going forward. Improve the state's business climate to attract and nurture and retain farmers and food companies, expand financing opportunities, or this bottom one, attract investment in food and agriculture. The Illinois Council for Food and Agriculture will start the process of refining these into the recommendations to promote to those bodies in the state that can act on it, whether it's the state legislature, the governor, the mayors of the cities. We'll even bring in national leadership. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack was in Chicago a week ago last Friday, spoke at a conference Friday morning. He referenced Farm Illinois as an unprecedented project that has brought together the leadership that is needed to effect change. Workforce and education. As I stand in front of Bob Easter, the expert really in education and what's going on in the state, I also recognize we have a lot of opportunity. And he referenced this honorary doctorate that Northern awarded me 4 years ago. I was in my Washington office one morning and I got a call from the University Business School and they said, Mr. Strom, we'd like you to come out and visit us. So I did, and they said, we want to recommend you for an honorary doctorate for sustaining food and agricultural systems in the United States. And I said, are you sure you got the right guy? Is this the right university? There's no ag school at NIU. But I think it shows, it simply symbolizes the way thinking has changed, because NIU produces a lot of students out of that college of business and other colleges within the university that go to work for food and agribusiness companies. And so they recognize the importance of making that link, promoting this industry as the most beneficial for the state of Illinois. Increase the emphasis on food and ag in education, establish a consortium of higher education, and build an awareness of the food and ag system. You know, so many times I think our residents, and I live on the edge of Chicago, I'm a farmer, and I've sometimes over the last 30 or 40 years have thought, boy, the people in Chicago don't appreciate what the agriculture sector does. But I also think that sometimes the agricultural sector hasn't actually appreciated what goes on in our urban communities, in our rural towns, and the assets that are there. We link them together. We can do so much. And I believe Rockford has the opportunity to really position itself as a hub in this sector. Resource management. Support existing efforts to encourage sustainable production. You know, we raise a lot of corn and soybeans, we do at home. Standard practices, we've switched to no-till in the last 20 years. We still have a lot to do in production agriculture. The use of cover crops is something that we're going to have to be more an advocate of implementing, because this state still produces the majority of the nitrates that go into the river system that go to the Gulf. But I believe as a farmer, and the farmers I know, they are stewards of the land. They want to do the things that best promote our environment. We can be the leaders in this state in moving this issue forward. I'm going to go to the third one, reduce significant waste streams all along the food system. I'll just mention a week ago, well, it was last Wednesday, a week ago tomorrow, the Secretary of Agriculture announced while at a speech in New York the new national initiative to reduce food waste by 50% in the United States by 2050, within the next roughly 30, 35 years. We have thoughts and ideas within Farm Illinois about let's do that here in Illinois. Let's set that effort, that table, that level of food waste reduction. We can be the leader. We can think of the technologies. We can establish the mechanism for leading that. We've already initiated a discussion with the Secretary's office in Washington to have Illinois be the leader and focus in that issue. Infrastructure, again, I realize Rockford gets this infrastructure thing. Again, when you sit at the highways, the airport here that I can recall, the Concorde landed here at Rockford because they wouldn't accept it in Chicago. You've got the runway capacity. You've got the room to expand. You've got the intermodal just 20 miles down the road. You've got the infrastructure in place here that we can leverage and build on. So this plan of ensuring that Illinois' infrastructure is capable of supporting the state's ability to sustainably meet its own needs while being the global leader, that can happen here at home. You know, Dr. Easter mentioned the greenhouse in Rochelle. I toured California the last couple of years. I was in Washington looking at specifically at the drought and how it was affecting the economies and finances out in California. With climate change occurring and how we address that, if we're climate smart in this, you know, we've had the benefit of the last 60, 70 years or more of having our food raised in California or Florida or Central America and shipped up to us. As that changes the economics in California, as they deal with the water issues, here we sit on the doorstep of some of the largest freshwater bodies in the world. We have the proximity. We now have the technology in greenhouses. And yes, the Dutch are leaders in this because they've been doing this for a long time, but also think that in China has 7 million acres under some form of greenhouse growing apparatus. Some of it's plastic, some of it's more modern technology, but that's a quarter of the land mass of what we grow in Illinois that is under glass or greenhouse in China. As we adopt these technologies here, we can build the infrastructure in Rochelle, in Rockford, in northern Illinois, in central Illinois, in southern Illinois to grow those products here because the economics of growing are definitely changing with what's happening in California. The last one there, we still have a ways to go in getting every household, every small town in this state connected onto broadband. Branding and market development, we also want to, in these strategies, raise Illinois' profile to boost domestic markets. There's been a lot of good things done. And let me also say, Farm Illinois is not trying to reinvent the wheel because we recognize, and the leadership of Farm Illinois has recognized there's been a lot of very good projects, studies, initiatives, work groups that have occurred over the years. Farm Illinois is simply a broader effort linking a lot of what's happened, and you bring the statewide leadership in food and agriculture together and say, here's the direction we need to go. That is a powerful statement. So branding and boosting our profile of Illinois as the world. You know, you look at some of the brands going on in neighboring states. There's Pure Michigan. You know, you immediately think of what's going on. And I know that the Department of Agriculture has some branding initiatives going on here. I think we can do better. Farm Illinois would like to promote the brand of Illinois, what we raise and how we deliver and how we are the leaders in innovation. That was the 6 categories of, and some of the 23 recommendations. We released this in the end of May, working with a international marketing firm in Chicago. You can see AP picked it up. Group hopes to build on Illinois' food industries. We've had a lot of interest nationally and internationally in what Farm Illinois represents. Let me also mention that Harvard University had contacted us recently, and they're going to use Farm Illinois as a case study topic this fall at their annual PAPSAC conference, the Private and Public Scientific, Academic, and Consumer Food Policy Group. This is an invitation-only session that's been going on about 20 years because they see Farm Illinois as a new way of collaboration in thinking and global positioning. What will success look like? You can read through these. We will increase our contributions to the state's economy. I think the director would enjoy if in a few years down the road they can look back and say, Illinois did the U-turn. We started this path in a direction led by the food and agriculture industry. We will be the most admired and sought after destination for food and ag business around the world. We'll have the leading thinkers, the leading education, the leading innovators here, and we will bring the globe here on an annual basis starting in 2018 to talk about and present what we can do here in the Midwest. And the farmers and food businesses will expand their already substantial role in global food security. You know, I think the numbers, and I should introduce Tyler Strom standing in the back of the room here. Tyler's been the manager of this project since the beginning. Bob mentioned a little bit about it. And help me again, Tyler. Illinois, we consume less than 5%.
Of our food expenditure is spent on food produced locally in the state.
And it amounts to about $2 billion, $2.5 billion. If we can just simply elevate what we produce locally, consume within the state boundary, we can add $1 billion or $2 billion to our state's economy just by doing that. Again, it may require bringing in the greenhouse infrastructures, the modern technologies of the day, but that investment yields the return. The next steps, the short term, we've been doing this, we've been all around the state, we have three of these left to do. We hope to wrap them up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Then, as I mentioned, on October 9th, we're going to establish this, we're going to have the meeting to decide on establishing this Council for Food and Agriculture and the membership of that. And then we will begin the implementation of the plan, and then the process. 3 years is not a long time to pull off a world-class global symposium, but when you've got some of the assets in Chicago and in neighboring communities, there's a lot of smart people who know how to put that together. I simply go back to this slide at the close because the most important element of this slide I see is that young child. Because this isn't about 200 years of history. This isn't about all the great accomplishments we have done in this state for the last 200 years. This is about the future. Whether it's a son or daughter or a grandchild or someone you know, having opportunity here in Illinois, because as I travel around the state in a lot of these small rural communities, and I don't know if you find this in Rockford, and a lot of young people, you know, they go through their schooling and then they come back to their community and say, where's the opportunity here? If we can ensure the opportunity around the state of Illinois going forward, that affects every child in this state from this point going forward. And as Jim said, he's very passionate about this state, a long lineage. And Bob, I'm third generation of Swedish immigrants who came to this country because they didn't have opportunity at home in Sweden. It's the story of so many of us. This is opportunity. This is opportunity for Rockford. This is what transforms the state. We focus on an industry we all know pretty well. It exists in our backyards, but now we integrate it with the leadership and with the food companies. There are 2,400 food manufacturing distribution companies just in the Chicago area alone. Some of them are household names, you know, if you think from McDonald's, Kraft, Mondelez, but there's a lot of small business and industry too. There's a lot in Rockford here. I know you've got a great food and ag industry, food processing industry up here. With that, I want to conclude my comments. I apologize for running a few minutes longer than I'd hoped.